Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 54 of the Memorial Memo KSR's Kentucky Women's Basketball Podcast. It's always more fun when you're getting on the podcast coming off a win, but unfortunately that is not the case today. But today's still going to be a good episode. We're going to get some exciting juices flowing for this one, and so we might as well go ahead and get it started, right? We start with, some of the more, unfortunate parts of the week. Kentucky falls in the AP poll. They were previously number 7. They had climbed as high as number 6, but Kentucky is now down to number 7. They were number 7. Now they're down to number 11. Kentucky fell 4 spots. That is the most spots fallen of any team that is in the AP top 25. Maryland and Oklahoma also fell three spots this week. But Kentucky fell 4 spots, now sitting at number 11, back outside of the top 10. Of course, I think before the season started, if you would have told me, hey, if Kentucky's going to be number 11 in the country towards the end of January, I think we'd be pretty happy with that. Just kind of disappointing seeing some of the results. Let's see. Maryland is at number 15. Oklahoma's at 16. Tennessee is number 17. Of course, Kentucky plays Tennessee on Thursday. Louisville's number 8, just kind of bouncing around the AP poll. Vandy's number 5. Texas lost at South Carolina, still at number 4. South Carolina's number 2. Vandy, like I said, number 5. LSU, number 6. So SEC still pretty high up there. Kentucky, it was a lot sexier for the SEC to say, we got, I think it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 teams in the AP top 10. Now it's just 5 teams, but hey, if you're the SEC, I think you're still doing all right. But if you're Kentucky, like I said, it sucks to be down to number 11, but it could certainly be a lot worse. Kentucky's also down to number 11 in the net rankings. They kind of bounced between 7 and 8 for a while, and after losing at Mississippi State, Kentucky falls to number 11. As you see on the screen, we got UConn number 1. I think they'll be at number 1 for a while until they lose, right? They just blew out Notre Dame, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. UCLA at number 2, Texas 3, Gamecocks 4, LSU 5, Michigan 6, Vandy 7, Louisville 8, Sparty number 9, TCU 10, and of course Kentucky at 11, Maryland's at 12. And then, of course, for Thursday, Tennessee's number 15. So that's a quad 1 opportunity. And speaking of quad records, Kentucky is now 4-3 in quad 1 after that loss to Mississippi State. And the Florida win, the game before that, did go down as a quad 2 win. Kentucky's first quad 2 really game of the season. Kentucky's 1-0 in quad 2. Quads 3 and 4. Kentucky is still combined 12-0 in quads 3 and 4. In the ESPN bracketology, Kentucky is now a 3 seed. They have bounced between a 2 and a 3 seed for the last couple of weeks. Not really a shocker, right? You lose at Mississippi State, a team you should beat. Not really surprising they fall a seed line at this point. But again, you're still in a position to host. You're still, doing enough, really more than enough actually right now, to be able to say, okay, we're going to host here in the NCAA tournament, right? I think that's the goal. I think that if you're Kentucky, that needs to become the standard, right? Under Kenny Brooks is to host in the tournament, and Kentucky's in position to do that still, even with that loss. Now, before we talk about Mississippi State, I do want to give some light, some shine on the Florida win, because that game was a lot closer than it needed to be. Kentucky was up by 15, or actually got up by as much as 17 on Florida. I believe it was just 15 at the end of the first, but I think it was 17 was like the highest Kentucky was up in general in that game. And then all of a sudden, Florida starts coming back, and they enter, the fourth quarter. Kentucky is trailing 73-66. And that really would have been a disastrous loss at home against a team that hadn't won a game in the SEC. And you're sitting there thinking, oh gosh, like this is really about to happen. And it sucks because it felt like we haven't had a game in the SEC yet that really feels like, okay, Kentucky, like there's not a game yet where you leave feeling like great. I say that. LSU and Oklahoma are great. Let me rephrase that. There hasn't been a game where you like blow a team out and come out feeling great because you beat Missouri pretty good, but Tiana Key gets hurt and you leave that game with a bad taste in your mouth, right? So, haven't really seen that yet. I don't feel like. Hopefully that happens. Hopefully Thursday against Tennessee. That'd be pretty sweet, and then maybe against Georgia on Sunday. But just talking about that Florida game. Florida shot the ball really well, 57%, 45% from three, made 84% of their free throws, went 16 of 19 from the free throw line. Florida played a good ball game, and it's like I said last week when we came on here. I was saying that, Florida is a really talented team. They have really two superstar players, Miara O'Neal and Liv McGill, who combined for 43 points, two highest scorers for them, right? O'Neal had 23, McGill had 20. But at the end of the day, Kentucky gets the job done. And that's a shout out to Toni Morgan, who had 26 points, 13 assists in that game. Just another monster stat line from her, transfer point guard. Just looking like the best point guard in the country. And look, I don't know if you I don't know. You could take a Rory Harmon or a Kiki Rice or a Raven Johnson, Olivia Miles, maybe plug them into the system and they do just spell, but I don't know. Toni Morgan's doing some really incredible stuff. And then Clara Strack, 21 points, 5 rebounds, 3 blocks. So really solid effort from those two. You got good stuff across the board as well. Like Jordan Obi had 12 points, 5 rebounds on 6 of 7 shooting. Asia Boone, 12 points as well. Like Kentucky, they did good and they handled Florida. It was a case of Florida is a team that you really should beat, I think, in my opinion. But when you get into the game and it's close, it's good to come out with a win, right? And I'm not gonna knock Kentucky. I'm never going to knock Kentucky for getting a win, right? Even like Liberty last year in the NCAA tournament. Kentucky gets this big lead, kind of like Florida. They get this big lead. It's a little too close for comfort. And then you're sitting there thinking to yourself, okay, are they going to lose? And then they don't, right? So I'm never going to knock Kentucky for a win. But at the end of the day, it's good to come out of that game with a win against Florida. Maybe small points to be concerned about from that one. We'll talk about some concerning stuff from like the Mississippi State game specifically. But at the end of the day, I'm not really mad about it. We've got Dakota in the chat saying, tuning in from Muhlenberg County, Kentucky, go Cats. Now, Dakota, this is going to break your heart. Can't stand Muhlenberg County. And I'll tell you why. I'm from McLean County, right next door. And I've got family in Muhlenberg County. I can't stand that blue and black and those Mustang colors. I can't stand anything about Muhlenberg County. Not that McLean County, you compare. It's like comparing, I don't know, it's like comparing two of the, I don't even know, like the redheaded children of counties in Kentucky, McLean County and Muhlenberg County. But I'm always going to take McLean County over Muhlenberg. So glad you're tuning in. Can't say I'm glad you're from Muhlenberg County, but regardless, want to give a quick shout real quick to our friends over at Roback. Now, you can change the game with Roback, a proud partner of KSR. Get the best fit and the best feel with their incredibly comfortable activewear. From polos and quarter zips to shorts and Delta Performance pants, you will look good and feel good with Roback. Use promo code KSR for 20% off your first purchase at roback.com. Now, we're going to spend a lot more time on this segment. We're only 9 minutes into the show right now. Kind of sped through that first part. But we got to chew on this loss a little bit at Mississippi State. Kentucky falls 71-59, and my big takeaway from the game, and there's a lot of things to take away, right? I think there are a lot of points that you can take away from the loss in Mississippi State. But to me, at least in my eyes, it all comes back to one thing, really, right? So you just go look at the minutes distribution for Kentucky against Vandy. All right, Jordan Obi plays 37 minutes, fouls out, so she may have even played a little bit more. Toni Morgan plays 36 minutes Asia Boone plays 38. Clara Strack and Amelia Hassett each play 39. And then 3 players off the bench for Kentucky, right? Lexi Blue, Kaylin Carroll, Josie Gilvin. Those 3 combined for 11 minutes and 0 points. Kaylin Carroll, Josie Gilvin played 2 minutes apiece. Lexi Blue played 7. To me, it is really disappointing that, for whatever reason, the bench hasn't been able to contribute and couldn't contribute against Mississippi State, right? I think there are problems. I wrote an article after the game where I said this team has a major depth issue. And, I mean, that's clearly the case, and it definitely was against Mississippi State. To be completely and 100% fair, you never go into a season expecting Tiani Key or Dominica Parova to get hurt, right? So, those are 2 more pieces, 1 starter, 1 who I don't know if she would have, I don't know if Dom would have started, but she would have been in a similar boat as an Asia Boone. Would have been a 6th or 7th man, I would say, maybe. So, you never expect to lose those 2. But to me, it's frustrating because, you've been able to make do with Asia Boone in the starting lineup. Like, she's been great, and she's been a really good bench piece all year. So, but you look at the rest of that group, Lexi, Kaylin, and Josie. They've all, at times this season, looked good, right? But why is it on a game-to-game basis we can't have those 3, sort of putting it all together? Like, why is it that, and to be fair, like Claire Strack and Tony Morgan, they have bad days. Everyone has bad days, right? I get that. But the point I really wanted to hammer on, or not wanted to hammer on, but the point that I just thought was true, the point that I see from watching that Mississippi State game is, okay, Kenny Brooks is asking a lot out of that starting 5 right now. And really, to be honest with you, he's asked a lot out of that starting 5 all season. And it's frustrating because when you look at players like Lexi Blue, a top 40 recruit, look at Kaylin Carroll, top 15 recruit, and Josie Gilvin, who, wasn't the superstar freshman or anything, but, comes off of a really, really great season at WKU. Why can none of those 3, why were they not able to come in and do something, right? And to me, it was a case of, was this January game lost back in July or something, right? Like, was this January game lost back in the summer when workouts were in full swing? We've seen where Georgia Amore, Clara Strack, Tiani Key, Tony Morgan, those players, right, the star players, we've seen where Kenny and the staff will really, really hammer in on their development. We've seen where they get the treatment like you matter, like you are everything to us. Like, we're going to make sure you end up being the best possible player you can be. And my simple question is, do the Josie Gilvins, Kaylin Carroll's, Lexi Blues of the world get that same treatment? Or are they getting that? Like, I hate to speculate. I hate to ask. But it feels like, this is what I was saying in the rapid reaction after the game, which I would recommend you all go listen to that rapid reaction after the Mississippi State game, because I would say those thoughts are even more coherent and well put together than the ones I'm having right now, even though it was fresh after the game. But why is it that I just don't understand why those 3 can't come in and do something, right? Again, because you see, like I said, top 40, top 15, and then Josie Gilvin, great year at WKU, right? You see those things, and you think surely they can come in and provide something, right? And I get it. It's got to click for the players too. Like, Kenny's talked about how Josie Gilvin's needed to adjust to his system. I'm assuming that hasn't happened yet. But my question is, well, how much work is being put in to make sure she is getting adjusted to the system, right? I just wonder, I just wonder how much of the lack of depth and everything could have been prevented. And then just kind of looking at the starters, right? I'm looking at, that starting five, and, Kentucky goes 23 of 72 from the field, 5 of 29 from three. And it's like I said in that rapid reaction where even a lot of the misses Kentucky had, they were short, right? A lot of the reason Kentucky lost, I think a lot of people, myself, people who don't even totally agree with what I'm saying right now, would say, well, Kentucky just didn't make the hustle plays. Kentucky didn't go get the rebound. They didn't get the loose ball. They didn't, whatever. Or they didn't make the switch on defense, whatever it is, right? And I think a lot of that you can just attribute to fatigue. You can attribute to, Tony Morgan and Clara Strack and all these players are being asked to play 35, 40 minutes a game. Every single game. And it gets to a point where, whether you listen to Kenny's press conferences or radio shows or whatever, he'll just drop every now and then to hey, these kids are going to get a day off tomorrow, or they're not going to do that much in practice because they need the rest. And a point that I brought up and that rapid reaction, it's not something that I want to speak into existence, but it's something that I think is a good food for thought, right? Liz Kitley, her senior season at Virginia Tech, she plays these kinds of minutes. And, right before the NCAA tournament, she goes down with a torn ACL. Georgia Amore last season, right, plays these kinds of minutes all season long. And as soon as she is drafted in the WNBA, she tears her ACL, right? Now, Tiani Key's injury, that is a complete freak accident that is not related to this at all. But what if, we get further in SEC play, or we're at March Madness, and a Tony Morgan or whoever tears something, right? They're so worn down, they tear something. I think with Liz Kitley, you would say, oh man, that sucks. Georgia Amore happens. Okay, that's a weird coincidence that two players like that tore their ACLs like that. If it were to happen again, I mean, is it a coincidence? I just wonder to myself, Kentucky's lost to Mississippi State. Don't get me wrong. They make shots, they win that ball game, right? But I think there are A, B, C, D, E, F, G things that went wrong in that game that I think really melt down into the starters being asked to do so damn much right now, and really just period all the time under Kenny Brooks. And the bench isn't really being, in my eyes, really developed that much, right? And you put those two things together, and to me, that's a loss to Mississippi State. That is, that's what happens when you're relying on 5 kids and they just don't bring it. Because normally, let's say you're starting shooting guard, can't make a shot. Okay, you bring in another one off the bench. And again, I know you don't expect Dom Perova or Tiani Key to get hurt, but I think for one, I think they could have filled maybe a couple more roster spots, right? But even then, okay, you have these 3 players on your campus in your gym. Why have they not been developed more, right? I know they have to understand the system. They have to be good enough to play. But is the same amount of energy you're putting into, say, a Clara Strack, is that being put into a Josie Gillen? That's just my thought. Diz fan in the chat asking, or really stating, saying it'll be interesting to see what happens once Millie, Tiani Key, etc. graduate. Miss the days when coaches pre-NIL and transfer portal would have 9-10 players deep. And, that's the thing. Whenever Kenny initially put this roster together, or even, I think he was actually in the midst of putting it together, maybe, I interviewed him in the offseason, and I asked him, I said, how deep do you think this rotation can be? And he said 9 to 10 players. And, again, you don't expect two players to get hurt in, not Asia Boone, Tiani Key and Dom Perova, right? You look at that roster, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So now you're working with 8 players, okay? And that's not ideal either, right? Because Gabby just doesn't play. You're working with 8 players, and you're asking to yourself, okay, that really sucks. We didn't plan for this, but hopefully those 3 that aren't in the starting 5 can come in and bring something, and they just couldn't, right? Like, don't get me wrong. I think Kaylin Carroll's going to be a great player here. But, is she really so bad right now to where she's playing 2 minutes? Is she that bad right now? Is Lexi Blue that bad to where she's playing 7? Is Josie Gilvin that bad where she's playing 2? Is it a lack of trust? Is it, it's just puzzling to me to see how Kentucky's starting 5 is literally the only production that this team gets. Okay? And right now, Kentucky's lost 2 of its last 4. And you beat Oklahoma, and that's a really great win. Not to be that guy, but to be that guy, Oklahoma doesn't look too great right now. Right? Not to be that guy, but be that guy. But took a really, really bad game from LSU to lose to Vandy. Now, I don't want to sit here and get into that rabbit hole, but there are just signs that point to me, like to wondering, does this team have a limited potential? Right? Does this team have a limited potential because of just the way the roster was constructed or the way, it's being developed? And it's frustrating because, in my opinion, Kenny Brooks is just too damn good of a coach to limit himself like that. Right? He's too damn good of a coach. There's too damn good of a staff. All this stuff. Too much resources. All this kinds of things to limit yourself in this capacity. So hopefully I sound like an idiot when I'm questioning if Kenny's, are they really trying to, develop the bench like that? Hopefully I sound like an idiot. But I just think it's worth pondering, why? Why do the minutes look like that? Why does the production look like that? I think it's a perfectly fair question to sit there and ask yourself. But moving on, after the Mississippi State game, right, we got Tennessee. And I just got to confirm today I'll be heading down there on Thursday. Looking forward to it, but not looking forward to it at the same time, right, because it's Tennessee. But I haven't been there, so that'd be kind of cool, right? And hopefully, we saw the men's and women's basketball magic kind of work together against LSU. Maybe it can against Tennessee as well, right? Tennessee is playing like one of the best teams in the country right now. Tennessee is playing like a team that, I believe were ranked number 8 in the preseason AP poll. This Tennessee team is a team that kind of looks like that right now. Right? They are 13-3 on the year, and they've won 6 straight games. Right? They started the year kind of losing some games that you maybe didn't think they shouldn't have. Like they lost against, in their season opener, they lost against, trying to think of the name. I can see the logo. North Carolina State, NC State. And, they lose to a team like that, and then NC State loses to Rhode Island. And you're thinking, is Tennessee that bad? And then they lose to UCLA pretty good. And then they lose to Louisville pretty good. And, at that point, Tennessee is sitting there 7-3. And, the standard down there in Knoxville is, 7-3 is not good enough. So there was people kind of pondering, is Kim Caldwell, does she got it? Is she going to be able to do this here? Her hockey-style subs, they don't work. This and that, it don't work. And they have turned it around, right? Since then, they've won 6 straight games. They beat Alabama by double digits at Alabama. Beat Mississippi State at Mississippi State by double digits. Their closest game of SEC play, just looking at it, appears to be Florida and Alabama. Each of those games, they won by 11. Just looking, or excuse me, no, they'll beat Mississippi State by 10. So there we go. But all of their wins in SEC play have been by double digits. And like I said, Tennessee, they're looking really good. I think they're starting to peak at kind of the right time. Last season, you may recall, Kentucky blew out Tennessee. That was a really important game. Kentucky blew them out at home, 82-58. And to go over some of Tennessee's best players to talk about, who can really do some damage here against the Cats, you got Talasia Cooper, 14.9 points, 5.7 assists, and 3.3 steals per game. Forward Janiah Barker is one of the top prospects in this upcoming WNBA draft. 14.3 points, 6.9 rebounds, 1.3 assists per game. Forward and Z Spearman, averaging 11.5 points, 7.1 rebounds, a team high right there, and 1.5 blocks per game. My goodness. If she was averaging 11.5, I think I'd have some real concern. And then freshman Mia Paldo, her sister, is actually on the team with her. But Mia averages 11.5 points, 2.6 rebounds, and 2.6 assists per game. You just go back to this Tennessee team, and if you'll recall, I had Kentucky losing this game in the preseason. And at the start of SEC play, before the first game was played, I flipped, and I said, I think Kentucky will win this game now. Now I'm on the fence. Now I'm sitting there saying, well, without Tiani Key, right? And I know they beat Oklahoma without Tiani Key, but man, lost 2 of their last 4 at Tennessee. That's a very tough place to play. Averages over like 10,000 fans a game. One of the best environments in the country. Literally the second best team ever, right? Historically, behind UConn. This is going to be an interesting game, I'd say. And I would like to think it's going to be a lot like last season, where this could be a game that could differentiate if you get the double bye in the SEC tournament or not, right? The SEC is so strong. Vandy playing out of their minds right now. Like Kentucky, at this moment in time, wouldn't host. Not host, but wouldn't have the double bye. And, of course, in the SEC tournament, you're kind of looking at any little thing you can get. So, you always want to get the double bye, right? This is an interesting matchup. Last year, Kentucky really, not exposed, but really just took advantage of Tennessee's style of play. Took advantage of, they like to run up and down the floor. Well, so does Tiani Key and so does Kentucky. Oh, shoot, you don't have Tiani Key this year. That really worries me. I think it'll be close, regardless of who wins. Like I said, I started the year thinking Tennessee will win. About 3 weeks ago, I would have said Kentucky wins this game. I think I'm back to my original pick. I think Tennessee wins this game, 81-76, and I'm going to pick Asia Boone as my MVP. I'm interested to see how Claire Strack and Tony Morgan do. This just feels like a game where maybe Asia Boone can come out and show us something, right? Got a comment in the chat here saying that they think Madden Greenway, Savvy Swords, and Emily McDonald, that class, will at least see a Final Four before they leave. These girls will play as freshmen and thus allow us to have a bench, hopefully. And, optimistically, I'm kind of in the same boat where, first of all, you have a foundation set of those 3 plus Kaylin Carroll. That is a tremendous foundation that Kenny Brooks can build around. But that's the only thing. He has to build around it. It can't just be that foundation. And Emily McDonald is ranked in the same kind of area that Lexi Blue was coming out of high school. And Lexi's a sophomore. And again, absolutely no disrespect when I say this, but you look at Lexi Blue's stats and you would say, okay, she's not a big-time contributor right now. So even then, right, I would say that foundational four isn't even totally solid, and Kenny even then has to build around that. So, I've never seen a team. I don't know if someone maybe they can correct me. I've never seen a team in college basketball win a national title with one or two great players, right? And nothing else. You've seen a team you see plenty of teams win national titles or make Final Fours with one or two great players and then solid pieces around them, right? But it's just there needs to be a bench, obviously, like you noted. There needs to be depth. That's important, right? Because what if Tiani Keek, or she won't be here next year, but say, I don't know, Kaylin or Asia Boone or someone gets hurt. You can't be in this situation again, right? Like, that's not ideal. So I understand playing your best players. I understand, putting the players in the game that will give you the best chance to win the game. But at the same time, I think, obviously when you're sitting there down a couple possessions with 2 minutes to go, you're going to have the starting five in the game because they're your best players, and like I said, give you the best chance to win, right? They'll be the ones there at the finish line. But sometimes those starters need to pass the baton in the middle of the race, right? Can't expect them to run the whole marathon by themselves. So, I don't know. I think you're right. I think Madden, Savvy, and Emily and Kaylin, that foundation can lead Kentucky to a Final Four. I very optimistically maybe think that Kentucky will get there. I have, that's the thing. Like, I'm talking about this Mississippi State stuff, and it sounds like I'm just complaining to complain. It's like Kenny said after the Mississippi State game. They're still 17-3. They're still really damn good. They're still awesome. They're still fantastic to watch and all this stuff. It's we're just nitpicking, right? Because we want Kentucky to be the best it can be. We want, I personally love Kenny to death. I don't know how he feels about me, but I love him to death. I want him to succeed. I want Kentucky to succeed because I and you all love Kentucky, right? That is no secret here on the Kentucky Sports Radio airwaves that we all love Kentucky around here. We want Kentucky to succeed and do well, right? We're just talking about, okay, what can Kentucky do to take that next step? And I think building, around that foundation of Madden, Savvy, Emily, and Kaylin can get Kentucky to a Final Four. But, back to Tennessee. I'm going to say 81-76 of Lady Vols. Ugh, I know. And I'm going to have Asia Boone as my MVP. I really hope I'm right. Or, excuse me, I really hope I'm wrong. Let me very much correct that. I hope I'm wrong, but I do hope I'm right about Georgia. There we go. Because I do think Kentucky will beat Georgia. I'll give you my score prediction in a minute. Georgia's an interesting team. They, kind of viewed as perennial bottom feeders in the SEC for all this time. And they're 2-3 in conference play. Like, they're not killing everybody. But they did start the year 16-0. They started the year hot, right? They started the year looking like, a team, they've been getting AP top 25 votes. I said 16-0. They started 14-0. I can't do math, okay? Say Georgia starts the year 14-0, and like they have good wins on their resume, right? You look in the non-conference. I know Georgia Tech's down, but they blew them out. They beat Kansas on a neutral court, beat Florida State. The most recent win, 82-59 win over number 16 Ole Miss. Ole Miss is actually the team that they had to play twice this season. They actually played the Rebels in their first game of SEC play, lost, came back and beat them, though. Got an overtime win over Texas A&M. Like, this is a good Georgia team. And if you'll recall last year, Kentucky swept them last year, but this is not the Georgia Lady Bulldogs of old. It's funny because Kentucky this week is playing the only two teams in the SEC that still has the lady parts in their name. People think about the Lady Cats from back in the day. Of course, that's not officially used anymore. But Lady Vols, Lady Bulldogs are still officially used I don't know. I just thought that was a little interesting kind of note, I guess. Speaking of Georgia Tech, got a Georgia Tech transfer, Danny Carnegie. This will be a really fun matchup between her and Tony Morgan because they obviously played together at Georgia Tech. They're both now thriving at their respective different programs. Carnegie is averaging 18.3 points, 6.1 rebounds, and 43.1% from deep. Trinity Turner, a really good player for them as well, 12.4 points, 4.8 rebounds, 4.7 assists per game. You got a guard and Riley Thurkoff, 10.3 points, 1.8 rebounds, 40.4 shooting from deep as well. And then Zen Kraft, not related to Robert Joe Kelly or the brand of cheese from my finding, averages 6.8 points, 5.1 rebounds, and 1.1 assists per game. So Georgia, not as stacked as a Tennessee team. And I don't know if Georgia's really going to end up, I don't expect Georgia to contend for the SEC title or nothing. But I do think they're a solid team. I think, I just think without Tiani Key, a lot of teams are going to give Kentucky trouble. At the end of the day, though, I am going to take Kentucky to win this one 74-67 at home. Mia Woolfolk, another great player for Georgia. She has been hurt lately. I don't know. She hasn't played in their most recent games. I don't know what that looks like coming for Sunday. We'll obviously get the availability reports before that game. But assuming she doesn't play, I'm going to have Clara Strack winning MVP, the KSR Memorial Memo honorary MVP from that game because, without Mia, 6'3", Mia Woolfolk, I just think Clara Strack can have a really nice outing in that game. So I think Kentucky goes 1-1 this week again. I really hope they can beat Tennessee. That would be awesome. I mean, I think that's what everyone in America should want, right? Because let's face it, Tennessee sucks. Tennessee's the worst. But at the end of the day, they're a talented team. Obviously, great tradition. And the great part is that Kentucky doesn't have to play their tradition. They're playing the 25-26 Lady Vols. Right now, they look good, but they have weaknesses. And Kentucky did really well against them last season. Kenny Brooks has whooped up on Kim Caldwell every time they've coached against each other. So I guess we'll see what happens. So I want to thank you all real quick for tuning in to this episode of the Memorial Memo. As always, we are 54 episodes deep, chugging along. If you enjoyed this episode, maybe even halfway, like, comment, subscribe, do all those wonderful things for us. I appreciate it. Steven appreciates it. We all here at KSR really appreciate it. Again, thank you all so much for tuning in. It's been a blast. Looking forward to hopefully being wrong about Thursday and being right about Sunday. Let's hope Kentucky goes 2-0 this week. Let's beat those damn Vols. Lady Vols. They go by Lady Vols, so let's beat them. Go Cats. Thank you all so much for tuning in. See you next time.